offer this welcome on behalf of Greg Peterson, the founder and perennial host of the Turner Winter Series these many years. We welcome with delight those of you who are with us this evening in the comfort of the Kappa Theater here in the Robert H. Jackson Center, as well as those who are enjoying this program virtually. And if you are with us on Zoom, please remember to mute yourself and to turn off your video camera right now. It is my great pleasure to begin our evening with a brief introduction of our special guest, Michael Hill, after which I will turn the conversation over to Jamestown's and the Jackson Center's own Greg Peterson. Dr. Michael E. Hill began his service as Chautauqua Institution's 18th president on January 1st, 2017, a position in which he has served for almost 9 years, including the challenging years of the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond, during which time the institution launched its streaming channel, CHQ Assembly, significantly broadening the organization's digital footprint while bringing Chautauqua's lecture programs to patrons the world over. These years have been fruitful in so many ways, as philanthropic giving has increased and significant milestones have been blessedly achieved. Supported by an endowment gift, Dr. Hill established the Perry Democracy Fellows Initiative at Chautauqua to create programs and experiences that strengthen the intellectual and emotional capabilities required for active citizenship and democratic participation. To bring sustained focus to one of the most consequential issues of our time, Dr. Hill created the Chautauqua Climate Change Initiative, which engages Chautauquans in important conversations and experiences during the summer assembly season as well as year-round. Under his leadership, Chautauqua pledged to achieve a net zero carbon impact by the year 2050. Prior to his appointment at Chautauqua, Dr. Hill served as President and Chief Executive Officer for YFU, Youth for Understanding USA. Prior to joining YFU, Dr. Hill served as Senior Vice President of External Affairs for United Cerebral Palsy. He had previously led national development efforts for the Washington National Cathedral as Executive Director for External Relations, and he held a similar role at the Washington Ballet. Earlier in his career, Dr. Hill directed a $125 million effort to expand the historic arena stage, securing the largest single gift ever made to a theater in the United States. Earlier on, he had served as executive director of St. Bonaventure's Regina A. Quick Center for the Arts, where he oversaw broad and significant innovations for that multi-venue arts complex. He had begun his career as a journalist, serving as a Dow Jones Newspaper Fund Fellow and as staff correspondent for the Courier-Observer. Dr. Hill holds a bachelor's degree in journalism from St. Bonaventure, a master's degree in arts and cultural management from St. Mary's University of Minnesota, and a doctorate in education from Vanderbilt University's Peabody College. He was a founding faculty member of the Master of Arts Management program at George Mason University, where he was named 2011 Faculty Member of the Year. He is a member of the Robert H. Jackson Center Board of Directors and a member of the Leadership Network of the American Enterprise Institute. Dr. Hill first came to Chautauqua Institution in 1996 as an assistant editor, copy editor of the Chautauqua Daily, and he later served at Chautauqua as a guest critic for theater and symphonic music. Dr. Hill will leave the institution at the end of May to assume his new role as president of Randolph-Macon College in Ashland, Virginia, beginning in September. As you can see already, Greg has once again invited an important and timely conversation partner to conclude our series this year and to celebrate Dr. Hill's tenure with us here at Chautauqua. So please join me now in welcoming Michael Hill in conversation with Greg Peterson. And once again, please remember to mute yourself and to turn off your video camera.
Michael Hill.
Greg Peterson.
January 10th, 2017, you came here merely 10 days after the Hill era started at Chautauqua. And we were so thrilled to have you then, and we learned so much about you in advance, but also during the course of the interview. And one of the things we started, because I listened to it again today, it was the fact that we learned, and I did not know that going into it, but both of us were born in January, hence Capricorns.
Yes.
They actually sang happy birthday to you and I, and that was magic because I had previously, in anticipation, read the horoscope of yours and mine, and we kind of compared notes to see how the evening would go. Well, not to be outdone, I did my research again. Here we are, 8 years later, with Mystic Meg. Mystic Meg is my go-to person to see what April 30th, 2025 for Capricorns would look like. So this is for you.
Okay.
You may find success in selling yourself today and skillfully articulating your worth to others. The same energy that can bring business victories today can also help you promote yourself in personal ventures. You may excel at an interview.
Oh.
Because you can explain clearly and confidently why others should join or support your endeavors. People may more readily see what they can gain from your talents. To access even more of your potential, relax and chant a calming syllable like for 10 minutes. So if you go into that today, it's okay, because I know it's a reason. Your intention is to focus on strategic planning and diligent effort to overcome challenges. But the bottom line, the final paragraph of this Mystic Meg, which spoke to me, because this is about your compatibility today. Who are you the most compatible with today, and today only? You're most compatible with, drum roll, another Capricorn. And it's the most compatible sign. With Capricorn, a practical and determined approach will enhance your combined efforts.
Love it.
Dive into tasks today, prioritizing efficiency and long-term goals, and that's what Mystic Meg has given to us today.
Gosh, that Mystic Meg.
Really very excited. Now, this week has been really captured our attention on many fronts, but we know that you are a St. Bonaventure alum extraordinaire. I mean, not only did you graduate from there, you're a former board member, you've taught there, you sang there, you've done just about everything at that Franciscan place called St. Bonaventure, because it is the leading private Catholic Franciscan university where students excel in academic and service. It's right here.
I appreciate that.
Yep. This past week, though, we've certainly been transfixed, the world has been transfixed by the death and funeral of Pope Francis, who chose that name after Francis of Assisi. Much has been written about his progressive views, including he was a pope among the people with an open heart towards everyone. He was also a pope attentive to the signs of the time and what the Holy Spirit was awakening in the church. Having seen and even read often articles to that ilk, as a good St. Bonaventure alum, a good Franciscan with the name of Pope Francis, what's that mean to him, Dr. Michael Hill?
I think like all Catholics, we've been watching this week, not only remembering Pope Francis's death, but worrying some ways about the future of our church. I mean, he from his very earliest days of being named Pope saying, "Pray for me," or this first time on a plane saying, "Who am I to judge?" Reminded us of the humility that is required to lead and that is required to serve. And so I've been thinking a lot this week just about the example that he set for all of us, in particular in a time where we all seem on edge about what's happening in our world, that reminder to care for one another. So it is a momentous week, not only I think for those of us that were raised Catholic, but for all people of faith and for all people who care about the future of humankind. So may he rest in peace.
As for parallels, perhaps, in what I just read, where he was a pope among the people with an open heart towards everyone, he also a pope attentive to the signs of the time and what the Holy Spirit was awakening in the church. When the white smoke arose over Chautauqua, and you went from being a candidate 1A to the number 18,
Yeah.
do you see any parallels in just the verbiage that I just read?
Oh, gosh. Well, first of all, I think it's hysterical. You did watch the interview again for
I know you're going to say get a life.
No, for our viewers, the notion of 1A was how the Board of Trustees was describing me before I became Chautauqua's president. I hadn't thought about that for almost 8 years, so thanks for the funny reminder. Look, I think there are parallels for what Chautauqua has been trying to do in the past decade, which is to bring this mission of helping people see the world and all its complexity to more and more people. And I was grateful that Maureen mentioned CHQ Assembly, our streaming platform. I think Chautauqua, which is this historic, storied organization, has been asking itself questions not dissimilar to the allusion that you have to Pope Francis, who was asking questions about how to make the church more modern. I think that's the journey we've been on at Chautauqua, and a journey I'm proud that we've been diving into.
We actually had a chance in 2021 to do a similar thing after COVID-19.
Yeah.
And so for anybody who's interested to know of the travails of Michael Hill and Chautauqua during that time period, that was very challenging, and we won't repeat that because you can watch it. But since then, you've had to adapt to Chautauqua, which it just kind of was shut down completely for 1 year, and with restrictions for a second year.
Yeah.
Bring us kind of current, just from a chronological viewpoint from, this was like mid-21 when we had that last interview.
Yeah, I think organizations like Chautauqua continue to adapt from that COVID period. I mean, I'm grateful that our recent seasons have not had us needing to do vaccine checks or have spaces which we did for a number of years. We had spaces where if there was a COVID outbreak, we could move students or others to be sequestered for health reasons. And while we certainly watch those types of things, we're not needing to do the same level of prep. But I think organizations are trying to still come out of that COVID period. I mean, audiences changed a lot after COVID. The fact that we do much more online, which we affectionately refer to CHQ Assembly as a COVID baby. It came out of that period of time, but now that's just how we do our work, and we have this significantly larger audience because of that. If you think about Broadway theaters really just started to come back in the last 12 months. COVID, we've been living with that, as you noted, for 4+ years. So I think the world's still trying to ask questions about what does it mean post-pandemic for us to gather, and certainly that's impacted Chautauqua.
CHQ Assembly, you mentioned it as a product of that, because I think I read someplace where that was in the planning stages, but perhaps had to kick in quicker than anticipated. Can you talk a little bit about that program specifically and how you're forced into it, and then kind of how you've tweaked it to today?
Yeah, well, I mean, Chautauqua well. Like many historic organizations, change is not something we do easily. So CHQ Assembly, which was simply at the time in our strategic plan called how do we put all of this programming online in some capacity, I think if COVID had not happened, we probably would have beta tested that for years and maybe started it more tepidly than we did. But when COVID hit, we had roughly 9 or 10 weeks to decide to go online with what was hundreds of offerings So we didn't, I mean, many people went on Zoom, many people went on Facebook. Chautauqua created its own digital network. And thankfully, we had partners in PBS and the New York Times and others who had done that. But we would have potentially gone dark that summer if not for that. Interestingly enough, of course, so it's very, very used the first year of COVID. I think it's used significantly in the second year as people were still feeling out whether they were comfortable being in gatherings. It's still used a lot, it's just used differently now. So I think where we have grown is people that can't be with us all summer in one camp, right? That will follow something at Chautauqua in the weeks that they're not be able to be with us. But the funnier usage has really been for people on the grounds who might be sitting on their porch, it starts raining, and they realize they don't want to walk across the grounds because they'll get wet, and so they'll stay and watch it on their porch. Or in a way that I'm really pleased with, folks who may have in this part of their life grown to be harder and harder of hearing, and all of a sudden things that might have become inaccessible to them because they couldn't hear as clearly in the amphitheater, even with an assisted listening device, can still watch it and put captions on, right? So the unsung hero for me of CHQ Assembly is its tool as an accessibility agent for people who physically, auditory reasons, would probably not have been able to enjoy our programs anymore and can continue to do so.
It's more of a curiosity to me is as speakers are more concerned about their product and the republication of their product. Like tonight, we were on Zoom, we're live, and the question is often, that's one thing, but you can put it up on your YouTube channel, which you have,
right,
and to have it republished. And have you run into that more and more where your artists, your participants are concerned about the republication?
I think because CHQ Assembly is still something you have to pay for, many speakers will say as long as something like that, the content is behind a paywall, what like they call a paywall, they're fine. COVID also did something really interesting. When we were, because even before CHQ Assembly, we were doing some streaming on Facebook and other mediums. I remember my first year we did a day live at Chautauqua where we did the entire day as much as we could put online as an experiment. Speakers and artists were much more anxious about that pre-COVID. During the year of COVID, the only way you could access content, whether as a presenter or a creator, was to be online. I think that changed things for many folks. Now, there are still people who get very anxious about letting their pieces be out there, but much fewer than when I first started.
Are you, from an institution, this is part of media, part of the narrative. Do you find as, like most institutions, having one voice, two voices, public, do you actually talk among yourselves as to what storyline and who can kind of get out the Chautauqua narrative? Now, that's not necessarily controlling, it's just getting consistency.
I think one of the blessings of Chautauqua is there's so many potential voices. I think we're constantly trying to figure out how to curate as authentic a Chautauqua experience for those who can't be with us as possible. So I don't know that we're as concerned about whose voice is out there. I think we each have a role to play, right? I mean, so there are moments where I'm blessed as president to be able to talk about things by virtue of the chair that I sit in. But Chautauqua is such a varied and interesting place. No one voice can represent it. And I think we've gotten a lot more comfortable in letting disparate voices speak about the Chautauqua experience over time as well. And maybe part of that's an outcome of COVID as well, who knows?
When we had our 2017 interview, notes I've made, remind myself, that once the smoke had been, white smoke had been, and you came and you were then talking with various of your constituents, your stakeholders, and you said you'd had advice from a couple of people you really remember, and one of them was a Chautauquan who was president of a Fortune 10 company. He said, one thing, Michael, you'll have to remember is that Chautauqua is more complex than my Fortune 10 company will ever be. Did you find that so?
Yeah, and even more so than I knew then.
Yeah.
I did an interview this morning with an Erie news station, and one of the questions he asked had me lift up something that I think is maybe unique only to Chautauqua in the scale in which we do it, which is it's one thing to do as many programs as we do, which are many, but if you think about presenters or arts centers or those types of things, they do the program, then they shut their doors. In some way, Chautauqua never shuts its doors because we do programming amidst community, right? Our venues are next to private homes. Sometimes our venues are porches. Sometimes our venues are green plazas. And I think that part of the complexity of Chautauqua is that its mission, its programmatic mission, lives alongside a lived community with all of the dynamics that come with that. So I think if I spent another 10 years at Chautauqua in this job, I would still continue to find layers of complexity I didn't know about the year before.
The other point you made during that our interview was that you will at some point become the de facto mayor of Chautauqua
Yeah.
Institution, which in fact is not a corporate entity for those who are new to this all. But do you find that to be the case also?
Yeah, you know, I think this job, and it's funny because the board's getting ready now to do a search for the 19th president, and so one of the things you do is try to write a job description, and the layers of this job are hard to put in words, because in some instances the place operates like a town, but I'm not an elected official, right? So by virtue of being named president by the nonprofit board of trustees, we pick up and manage what feels like municipal services. And I think there's a tug and pull for anyone who sits in the chair. Some people really want the president of Chautauqua to be their mayor, and they view it that way, right? That you should be directly accountable to everything from garbage pickups to street plowing to what have you. I don't know of another job where you operate like that, plus you're running programming, plus you're doing fundraising. I mean, I suppose in some ways my next assignment is as similar as I could give an analogy, which is being a college president, but it's a unique aspect of the job for sure.
Do you find, part and parcel of that is the programming of Chautauqua, and that's what really seems to be the heart and soul. I mean,
Yeah.
when you have people comment on Chautauqua, especially those who are here and see Chautauqua as a tourism destination, they're not necessarily going to talk about the grounds. They see what's the program, who's the special events, what are this, what's that. And how does that work as far as, this is more of a curiosity, how does that work where you've got slots? You got 9 weeks, you've got the 5 days during the week where you got the 10:45 lecture, you got the 2 o'clock lecture, you've got special events, you have weekend special concerts and stuff like that. Do you guys sit in a room and chart it out on a grid, or did you have sort of spheres of, let us know?
Well, yeah, so part of the challenge of Chautauqua is that there are the things, some of which you just listed, and then there's a million other things that folks don't even know about. And I'll give you one funny story. There's a guy who's become a dear friend who has been a very regular contributor both at the 1045 and the Interfaith Lecture to a guy named Ibu Patel. He's come for more than 10 years. He's probably given somewhere between 6 and 10 talks. And one day, this was 2 or 3 years ago, I was referencing our students and the young people on the grounds. And he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, on the north end of the grounds, there's the schools, and there's all these young people from colleges and universities from around the world who are here studying." And he said, "I've been coming to Chautauqua for a decade. What do you mean all these young people?" He said, "There's many things I think of as Chautauqua. Young people is not often what I would describe." And so I put him in a golf cart and I took him to the place on the grounds where most of our students are studying. And he said, I've been coming here for a decade, I never knew this existed, right? So when we talk about the grid, the hysterical part of that is there's what you see most prominently listed, and then there's probably another 700 activities that you wouldn't know of unless you were a niche part of a specific program. But I am lucky to serve with a talented group of programmers. There's discipline-specific vice presidents. We have a chief program officer. We get recommendations from community members. We now, on our website, you can recommend people for any of our programs, and so we get a huge amount of input from folks that come. We also will invariably hear from people who have been there. You know, a speaker that was there one year will fall in love with Chautauqua and recommend folks next year. So input comes from lots of different places, and I continue now, this is my 9th season, to marvel that it all comes together at all, given the volume and the complexity of what happens there in a summer.
I'm going to ask one of those, you can't believe this happened, Greg, type of things, when some speaker or concert or something, which is kind of the funniest thing, or humorous, or most, somebody didn't show up, or somebody had to get us to lecture, somebody like that, because it's got to happen. You don't have 700 events, and somebody has an attitude and doesn't want to go on stage, things like that. Give me your funniest episode or two.
Oh gosh, well I love that Maureen Raveno introduced this, because Lord knows she pulled off that magic during her time as director of the Department of Religion. And what I would say about someone not being able to come is almost never do you get an appropriate amount of notice. Almost always it is the day before. Sometimes it's, I mean, in the most extreme cases it can be, hours before. But here's the beauty of Chautauqua, which is at least twofold. One is the cherished place that Chautauqua Institution has in our country and in our world, and how simply uttering those words of the place will have people do extraordinary things to get there. And so we've been blessed by that. And Maureen overnight replaced someone who was supposed to speak on civil rights, and literally found someone who had been with Dr. King when he was assassinated, right? Overnight. Plugs in one of the most incredible lectures of my time. But the other great thing about Chautauqua is, in addition to the people we bring, there's extraordinary people that are quietly there absorbing the program. Mm-hmm. And those folks have stepped in the past. You'll think, oh goodness, something just fell out, and you realize that, there's a leading physicist who rented a house for a week, and somehow it gets to you that they're there and they filled in. So it's, if people knew how many times it has almost come apart and come back together without the audience knowing, it's a great thing to behold.
Funny you should mention the one about Maureen, because I was the real beneficiary of all that stuff. Because when that happened, she mentioned that, and I, as shy as I am, I'm
shy. Yeah, that's how I describe you.
Yeah. As I went and interviewed her, and her story about being there in Tennessee, in Memphis, at the time when Martin Luther King was shot, held his head bleeding, and all that stuff. You're kind of unbelievable, and that's because of the many serendipitous things, but Maureen's connectiveness was amazing. So it's funny you should bring that up, because I would have. It's remarkable. But also you have an intelligence network that kind of knows who's on the ground.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Chautauqua, you mentioned the mayor piece. Chautauqua operates like a small town, and there's not many secrets there. So not only do you often hear who's on the grounds, but when you need to tap into it, help will come. There's usually someone there.
So I'm going to segue to an event at Chautauqua, which ties in a couple of things we've already talked about, the CHQ Assembly, and an event which was in 2022, which got a lot, obviously much attention, even got you to sit in a seat in Mayville at the Chautauqua County Courthouse with Salman Rushdie. But my own personal thing, I'm literally at my office to tune in, and I typed in the password, and all of a sudden, it kind of started, and it's just blank.
Kind of went away.
And all of a sudden, I thought, my God, I didn't pay the subscription. Those Chautauqua guys are unbelievable of how they force you to get that, and it just went blank. And my office is next to the FBI. And so this is like, because all this occurred, now I've read it today, at 10:47.
Yeah.
You know, when things happen. At 10:50, I can't believe it. You know, I'm one of those. So I got out of my office and went to a room where you can relieve yourself. And there was a guy also doing the same, and he had a cell phone. He go, yeah, we got him. Yeah, I don't know if he's going to make it, but we got him. Yeah, okay. And so I'm listening to this without possibly knowing there's any connect at all.
Yeah.
But it was. And that's how my CHQ assembly networking got to knowledge of what was going on. But I want to talk about that. I want to, because that, along with COVID, that's an event which transformed Chautauqua.
Yeah.
And not everybody probably heard your testimony, but, and you can only say what you want to say.
Yeah.
But clearly that was public testimony. But here I am in the Rushdie seat. I am literally here.
Yeah.
And Mr. Reese is there.
Yeah.
His name is
Henry Reese.
Henry Reese. And you're over,
Well, I actually was in the audience. Sony Toname, who my colleague was
Okay,
doing the
that's right.
announcements. I was in row 4.
talk about that day and really the 48 hours that followed that.
Yeah. Look, I mean, for Chautauqua, it was probably, I can't think of another that would qualify as the worst day of our institutional life. For a place who wraps itself in the brand of being safe, it was, of course, it was literally violent, but it was metaphorically the most violent thing that could be done to that sacred place. I was talking a little bit to the Erie reporter about this today, because who it happened to also collides with. Look, Chautauqua lifts up voices sometimes that people don't want to hear. Salman Rushdie represented and represents the human symbol of the fight for freedom of expression. So that all of that happened at Chautauqua was beyond a seismic event. And so that, that's on the organizational level. But then you take it to the human level. A couple thousand people watched an attempted murder live. What do you do with that? If you're in any level of responsibility for a community. So I think often about that day. There's the organizational response. There's the response to this human being who had been harmed. And then there is the question of how to even begin to think about caring for a couple thousand people who watched someone try to be killed. And the trauma didn't end there. It impacted the people that weren't even there to see it, but who all of a sudden felt unsafe. If you think about 1047 onward, the actual incident contained the perpetrator in handcuffs and Salman Rushdie in a life-flighted helicopter probably within 15 minutes. All those things happened. Within that same hour, he had left a backpack there. No one knew if there was a bomb in there. And this is where the size and complexity of Chautauqua makes it even more complicated. We have young kids at Boys and Girls Club. We have students on the other end. At that time, no one knew if he was there alone or not. So the next, I would say, 3 to 6 hours were horrifying for everybody. And then we had to make a decision on whether to open or not. All at the same time that it's not an exaggeration to say the international media complex descended on Chautauqua Institution. So much has been written about it. I've talked a lot about it as much as I continue to try to make sense of it. Mr. Rushdie's written a book about it. There will be a documentary at some point that he is participating in, and a year later he came back, right? So in my last weeks at Chautauqua, everyone invariably asks the question about what are you going to remember most, or what were your favorite moments, and I've always struggled with this one because, of course, this will be maybe the thing I'll remember most. It forever changed my life, and I suspect it did for many other people. What I'm proud of, though, in the midst of all that, is we had an institutional choice that we could make that only worked if the community also made a choice, which they did. They chose to come back to the program, and they chose to come back to the program the very next day, to the very place where they watched, what I'm guessing is probably for most of them the most horrific thing they've ever seen in their lives, because they believed that was part of the response to that act of violence. If people had said that's too scary, I don't want to, or look, if this is what it looks like to engage difficult conversations, I'm out, the great experiment of Chautauqua could have ended. So lots of people like to talk about what we did or didn't do. I think the more heroic story is what our audience chose to do. And not only that day, but afterwards. And it's the reason the place is still, in its 151st year, still having the most impactful conversations that it can have.
Incredibly transformational. At some point, because things are happening so fast, it's a crime scene.
Yep.
It's a crime scene. In addition, it's the International Media Center. And at the same time, I can only imagine a fly on the wall where you decided to have an ecumenical event at the Hall of Philosophy, as I recall, where you spoke and a few others spoke. And I can't even imagine how you got your thoughts together, or anybody got their thoughts together. What was that meeting like, if you can share, you're saying, we got to do something, but here's what you decided to do.
Well, so the other little-known part of the story is the leadership team got somewhat forcefully placed into the colonnade right after that happened. I got taken there by state police and, in essence, put in my office. And that space became the command center for how we were going to respond. And we were asked to not leave until they had a better sense of what was happening. And the thing that was frustrating is there are a ton of people we loved who didn't get locked away, right? I didn't know how the community I served was handling this because I couldn't get out. My husband couldn't get in. He was off the grounds and was not permitted to come up into the office. And I've often said that, and this is true always at Chautauqua, that Chautauqua is an exercise in shared leadership. Everyone that day took turns providing their best to stand up and do something. the ecumenical service comes right out of what I think makes Chautauqua distinctive, which is so many organizations, even those that were founded by religious orders, pay nominal homage to that. Chautauqua's never walked away from religion, even when all, the polls say there's more nuns than organized religious folk anymore. Chautauqua has always understood the power of the lens of religion. And on that day when nothing else made sense, what's left is to pray.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that was left. We didn't know enough to do much else. And honestly, I think, and I've seen so many videos of that time, what we needed was to be together. And we needed to offer any pathway to trying to understand any sense of logic, and Chautauqua has always turned to prayer. I think it was the only thing we could have done.
You chose thereafter, really, with some modification, but to start up your programming.
Next night.
Yeah. Was that a difficult decision?
Very. We didn't get control of the amphitheater until much later in that day, and because it was such a horrific act, there was, not to be macabre, we had to clean the amphitheater. We had some basic things to do. And we had to make a decision about when to open, if to open, and impossible dilemmas, right? Does it look disrespectful if you open too soon? Does it look like the guy who did it wins if you don't open soon enough? What do you do with a few thousand people who came to do program and we don't have program, but they're traumatized if you don't gather? And those are at the macro level. Mm-hmm. How do you do that with, in essence, what is a group of kids who are college-age students who are running all of the technical aspects of the amphitheater, who also just watched something horrific? Mm-hmm. Look, even in hindsight, I don't know how to gauge whether we made the right decision or not. What I do remember vividly, and I've talked about this before, is I honestly didn't know if anyone would come or not. We were doing the Washington Ballet with our symphony, and because there were dance curtains up, I couldn't see the audience. And I remember being backstage, and understandably, they were like, if you're gonna be a part of the program, you need to be backstage. And of course, we were locking everything tighter than tight, and rounding the corner from the dance curtains and seeing a full amphitheater was the answer to the question of should we have opened. And I think the answer is yes, but it was a hard decision.
You had a prominent speaker that you had to kind of, because you wondered about the security aspect of it. Mm-hmm. That week. I'm just drawing a senior moment as to the name of it.
The next week or the week on Courage?
Well, yeah, I think it was the following week. Was it a congressman?
No, the following week, the person that made us nervous was Maria Ressa, who had won the Nobel and the Pulitzer, and had received a number of death threats and needed permission to leave her country. And she gave a really tremendous speech about why it was important to keep talking. Yeah.
I'm just going to go crazy if I can't remember that. Adam, his name's Adam. Never mind. One of the things, having read a little bit about the Rush, he did write a book.
He sure did.
Knife.
Yeah.
And without you commenting on it, but one of the things that I learned, and just frankly, I don't think got any attention, is the fact he and his wife returned to the area.
Yeah.
And he and his wife went to the jail. I'm going to read this. He says he went to the county jail and stood outside the facility where A is being held. He also went back to the institution and walked on the stage to show his wife where it all took place. This again, Salman Rushdie, writing, I felt, quote, I confess, just a little bit triumphant as I stood there. There he stood alongside institution president Michael Hill, who described the emotional and healing moment. Quote, this is your quote, I believe, simply to be able to stand in front of him, see that he was okay, and be able to express some fairly intimate reflections on how much we had been praying for him. I don't think anybody really knew that happened. How did it happen, and did you get much advance notice, or did you just kind of the day before say, my wife and I are stopping by?
No, we had probably a few weeks' notice, and honestly, the day he came was the second attempt, because there had been some issue with his flight or something, so a week or two prior, we had expected him to come back, and then that canceled and it got rescheduled. And as you can imagine, his return was not going to be something we publicized.
Sure.
And I remember being as nervous about it staying quiet as, well, not as I was about him coming back, but I was very nervous about it staying quiet. And to make it a little bit lighthearted, all this effort we went into to, meet him at the gate, get him down to the amphitheater quietly, make sure that he wasn't disturbed because he had requested some quiet time in the amphitheater. And the amphitheater, it's not the easiest place to secure. It's mostly open air space. And so we had worked with state police and local county sheriffs to make sure there was a significant presence around that day. And
This happened during the season?
no, this is off season. This
Okay,
was
okay.
it's 3 or 4 weeks after the season, and so we're down there waiting for him to come, and the law enforcement officers had agreed to be kind of in plain clothes, so that if someone was walking by the amp and you see 8 to 10 uniformed law personnel, that's going to call attention. So, of course, because Chautauqua is a lived community, they're there on the front of the stage waiting for him to come, and I'm guessing somewhere around 80 to 85-year-olds decide to just walk through the amp right at that moment. And one of the law enforcement guys says to me, "Do you want me to take them out?" And I said, "No, carrying a couple of folks out of the amphitheater is also probably not right." So I don't think they had any idea. They just kind of walked in the amp and said, "Oh, it looks like this," and they walked up the steps and out about 5 minutes before he showed up. So the nerve-wracking notion of welcoming him back.
You meet him for the first time since that event.
Yeah.
I mean, there he is.
Yep.
He's got the eye patch on with his wife. What's your emotion?
Oh, it's tremendously emotional. One, because, remember, I didn't get to meet him that day. I was going to say hello after the event. Clearly that didn't happen. So my last physical memory of Salman Rushdie was him being taken out on a stretcher out of the amphitheater, and I hadn't seen him since. And understandably, we didn't have any real way to be in communication with him or his family afterwards. We had for a few days afterwards, we were in touch. We were helping manage logistics around a number of things. But probably 3 days after the attack, we had no more access than any other human being on the planet to how he was doing, how he was recovering, was he recovering? I mean, all the information we had, you would have had the same time it showed up in any media outlet. So to be able to stand in front of him and, one, see that he was okay, but to communicate what at that time had been the accumulation of a year of prayers and anxiety and grief, and he was really wonderful, because one of the things he made space for was the acknowledgement that while no one suffered what he did, so there's no way drawing a parallel, there was an understanding that he was coming back to a community who had experienced trauma and was processing its own trauma, and he made space for the fact that for anybody involved, whether you were an audience member, a community member, or a president, that we had our own experience of trauma. And so part of the conversation that I will always be grateful for is his making space for a shared traumatic experience. Again, no one to the extent that he did. So it was healing. It was healing on a lot of levels.
And it was kept secret.
It was.
And Rushdie dedicated his book, for those that may or may not have had it, but to the men and women who saved his life. That was the dedication of it all. Has there been otherwise communication with he or his agents at all since then? Nothing regular. When journalists or others want to talk about what happened on August 12th, there will every so often be a casual check-in with one another about that. What is he talking about? What are we talking about? But no, I mean, I think all at Chautauqua follow him maybe even more closely than even the most ardent Chautauquan fans did. I feel there's a different sense of ownership of that relationship now. But I just am always happy when I see that he's out still talking. Yeah. Anytime there's a trauma like that, and a perhaps term of transformation, but is it a teaching moment?
Yeah. Look, I think I reflect a lot on August 12th, mostly now these days privately. I think that day forced Chautauqua Institution to have a reaffirmation of its mission. I think we've always asked questions about how controversial someone might be when we bring speakers, because we want to push the envelope, but we want to do that responsibly. So I think we ask ourselves more vigorous questions now when someone might be in the public eye. I know we talk a lot about how one effectively helps audience members and community members unpack tough issues. The same year, a reporter asked me today, given the political climate in which we find ourselves, does that make me question how Chautauqua does what it does, or should it do it differently? And what I said to him was, I said, because Chautauqua is as old as it is, 151 years, this is not the first era in Chautauqua's history where the nation is in tension with itself. I mean, it certainly has its own unique characteristics right now, but Chautauqua was convening these conversations during the Civil Rights Movement. Chautauqua was convening these conversations just after the Civil War. Chautauqua convened these conversations during Vietnam and the Cold War. I think what it does is remind us how important it is for places like Chautauqua to exist, and I worry that there are fewer and fewer of them. But it makes me proud that this one is still as strong as it is.
What did you learn about the community through that project? You talked a little bit about how they reacted. Some of it spontaneous, some of it was, but obviously not the opportunity of a lot of forethought. It was
Yeah.
reactive. But now you've had 3 years, or so, 2 years so, and you've had to implement certain things within the community, which
Yeah.
are from the administration, certainly security things, things that have, you could see it at the gate. There's some things which are more demonstrable to the
Yeah.
outside community than others. How do you think they've reacted to that as a necessary evil, or, do you get a sense from your position?
Yeah, I'm proud of our community in a few different ways specific to that question. One is the security response that followed August 12th was very different than anything most Chautauquans had ever experienced at Chautauqua. And they rolled with it, and they were understanding about it, and that included everything from not being used to needing to have clear bags to standing in longer lines to go through these devices, right? And like many things at Chautauqua, there was a sense of fierce shared protectiveness that came from our community. And I've just found them to be more willing to, yes, they want to have a conversation about whether it's necessary. Yes, they might have strong opinions about it. But there was a collective sense that the future of Chautauqua and its work was all of ours to make sure it continued. And they, now some of these things we do are routine, and I find that the Chautauqua audience just accepts it. What I'm most gratified about is I worried after August 12th that core brand attribute I talked about, which we most often describe as if you have a parent with young kids, you can send your kids on a bike across the grounds and they're safe. That still happens today. That act of violence did not take away the sacred safety that is Chautauqua. And I think that's remarkable. And I attribute that to our community that shows up every day to care for one another. It's the reason it's still the same.
You once mentioned not once, in 2017, you actually mentioned it, that as you were going through the arc of your various careers, which Maureen so extensively identified, really there were only two positions that would bring you back to Western New York. One would be the president of St. Bonaventure, which you were academically not qualified for at the time. And I'm not sure what was missing, but maybe your doctorate?
Correct.
Okay, you now have it. And Chautauqua Institution, and you've developed that Chautauqua Institution. We are at the end of 8 years, and when somebody decides to, 10 years from now, write about the history of Chautauqua, and they're talking about the Michael Hill era, what do you think they might talk about?
Gosh. God, they're the things you wish they would talk about, and then who knows what history will say. Look, I think any remembrance of my time at Chautauqua will be placed in the context of the forces of the world, right? I mean, I didn't see COVID-19 when we were chatting in 2017. It changed a lot of our trajectory. I didn't anticipate what August 12th would do to us. I mean, I think for better or for worse, my tenure has had some seismic things occur at Chautauqua. I hope they write more about the community and the shared leadership than me. But I also think this is a period of time where Chautauqua really pushed back out into the world. I wrote to our board, I had a final report. Our board of trustees is meeting this week, and I do a written president's report, and this was my last. And one of the things I reflected on in that report was Chautauqua has, throughout its history, been in tension with itself about the dreams of our founders, and which gets encapsulated is Chautauqua a place or a movement? And at times it has been more of one thing, and at times it's been more of another thing. There have been moments in our organization's history where we've been both. When I showed up in 2017, we had been in a period of principally focusing on place, beautifully focusing on place. I think the last 8 years we've tried to reclaim some movement pieces in ways that I'm proud of. CHQ Assembly is one, sending Chautauquans out in our travel program is another. Some of our partnerships we've done that have had us do things in other cities. Chautauqua's tried to bring its goodness outward during this period of time. And I hope whomever comes after me cherishes both the place and the movement, because I think that's Chautauqua at its most powerful. I think Chautauqua is less than when it decides it's one or the other.
But with that comes attention.
Yes, for sure.
With the place or movement, and I know that it created just a little bit of a stir when the New York Times covered it, and you got kind of the magazine kind of above the fold activity. I know they interviewed you. They interviewed a lot of people.
Yeah.
Has it had much after effect? I mean, in the moment, it's like a lot of headlines. It grabs itself, but it seemed like that the underlying that is something I hadn't really thought about till you mentioned it. Place versus movement. People, having that place versus something else. And I know that's a feeling you have is kind of more towards the movement of Chautauqua. But it's attention. So is that how that, I mean, that's why I kind of now look at that article. Is that a fair thing to look at?
Yeah, no, I think it is a fair thing to look at. It's funny. An examination of Chautauqua's history will tell you that almost none of us have experienced anything unique. So while that article highlighted some specific examples, that's not an old argument at Chautauqua. Oh. And some of the characters that were lifted up are some of the same characters that have been at the center of previous controversies in air quotes at Chautauqua. I would boil it down to this. People who come to live at, frequent Chautauqua are among the most passionate participants of an organization of any place I've ever seen. They care very, very deeply. I think one of the reasons we joke that change is so hard at Chautauqua is because it is so cherished and magical to people. I have my own versions of what is special and important to me at Chautauqua. Anytime Chautauqua has raised that question of place movement and tried to adjust the puzzle pieces, I think that's difficult for folks. But my takeaway is because they love it and care for it so much, and they're afraid of losing something in the change.
This has been spectacular, and I am so thrilled that we started something in 2017 and kind of ending something here in 2025, and I hearken back to Mystic Meg.
Mystic Meg.
Who says, you may excel at an interview because you can explain clearly and confidently why others should join and support your endeavors. I feel that way, and I thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Michael Hill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.